All right, so based on this text itself, what are the causes of the American Revolution? Go ahead.
Colonies were suffering under tyranny, and they saw that they should establish their own form of government, and it was subject to the fact that Britain was apparently ruling over.
Okay, fair. Eliam, what else? According to this text, what caused the American Revolution? What's up? Jefferson's going to tell us why we're breaking up. What's that? You're still reading? Okay. Ruby, what do you think? Yeah, why? Why are we breaking up?
Basically, they have natural rights, and Britain is being like a tyrant to them.
Okay. Agreed.
Similar, I agree with Ruby. They were being a tyrant to the colonies and taking away their freedom, pursuit of happiness, and security.
Okay.
So Britain didn't violate their natural rights.
Okay. Agreed. On all fronts. Kat, what do you think?
Oh, didn't say that. Natural rights.
Sure. Sure. Chris, what do you think? Why are we breaking up?
The British government isn't like upholding what America believes the government should do.
Sure. Does he mention taxes? Interesting. This entire, yes, in the actual he has, there's taxes, there's a bunch of different things listed. But I think it's overblown to argue that it's just about taxes. Right? One of the questions I saw a lot of you guys left blank on your homework last chapter, on chapter 7, it's a hard question. And we talked about it Thursday after school, those of you who were still here. It's a really, really good question because it asks, you could argue that the economic conflict simply revealed a deeper political conflict. The colonists' complaints about economic policy, taxes, really revealed the deeper issue was about role of the government, consent of the governed, big picture stuff that Jefferson argues here. So yeah, according to Jefferson, we're breaking up because of the role of government. They're being tyrannical, they're being acting as despots. So I think it's this we want to know why. We'll do the same thing when we talk about why the South seceded in the Civil War. We'll look at, you tell me. What does your Declaration of Independence say? And then don't come back later and argue that the war is about something else, when in reality you told us right at the very beginning what the war is for. It's in your words. So in Jefferson's word, it gets signed by everybody else. We are declaring independence because we don't believe that your government is serving our best interests, our natural rights, our needs, like it should be. And now the official war can begin, even though in this room we can all argue the war's already been going on. Go figure. So let's talk about advantages and disadvantages. America has two advantages we can point out at the very outset, at the beginning. The first is home field advantage. The war is going to be fought in the American colonies, so they know where they're going, they know their way around, they're on their home base, so to speak, for supplies and the like. They're very familiar with the territory. The second advantage is America does not have to win the war. They don't. They have to just not lose. Sinead looks very confused.
Wait, what?
The colonists don't need to win the war. They need to just not lose the war. They need to kick the British in the shins until they're like, screw it, whatever, we're over this, we give up. Because one side is fighting a war for independence, the other side is fighting a war to keep that group in their empire. So the colonists need to just fight long enough until Great Britain's like, fine, screw it, we're done here. They also have the added advantage that doesn't materialize right away, but it will soon, in that they can get help from Britain's enemies. Great Britain has a lot of enemies. That's not when you fight a war every 6 weeks all over the globe. Everybody hates you. So those are important advantages. Another way they're going to be an advantage is that the colonists are not going to fight a traditional war. Great Britain's going to be like, join us in the field of fighting and stand up and shoot. So our armies can square off. And the colonists are like, no, we're not going to do that. We don't really even have an army. So we're going to hide and hang out in the bushes and shoot you from around the corner and fight a more unconventional war, much like the Vietnamese. The disadvantages, however, there's no army. That's kind of a big disadvantage in a war. The army will be slapped together very quickly and not very effectively. There's no well-trained soldiers, no well-trained officers. There's no money. There's no supplies. There's no manufacturing. There's no banking system. We've been relying on Britain for everything. And now we're like, yeah, screw you, Britain. We're going to fight you without anything that we need to get from you. And my point earlier that even if it was 100% support, which it's not, it's about a third, and a third now of this 60, right? Some have gone this way, some have gone that way, others have just stayed in the middle. It's not, our population is much smaller than that of Great Britain. On the British side, way more people. They have 11 million people in Great Britain versus 2.5 million in the colonies. And even of those 2.5 million, a third are either loyal to Great Britain still or slaves. Can we have the slave fight? Sure, it's a terrible idea for keeping the system of slavery, though. Because if you argue that a slave can fight a war for you, then they're no longer eligible to be your slave. Britain has the world's largest navy, a big army that is well trained and disciplined. The British have support in Great Britain, in the colonies, from loyalists, from natives, from slaves. Let's talk about this for a second. Why would natives support the British army? They hate the colonists, and they see what Britain's doing, trying to restrict what the colonies spread out. Why would slaves support the British? They want to be free. They also hate the colonists, exactly, right? Anyway, so the slaves are going to go wherever their freedom is offered. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the British already have a huge presence in the colonies. Their army's been there, the navy's been there, their forts are there, because one day ago those forts were British forts. So the British have a significant amount of advantages. But the disadvantages, I'm going to argue, are a bigger deal. And this first one is the biggest disadvantage. The British have a ton of war debt. Why? Too many wars. They've been fighting wars constantly for 100 years. Who has to pay for those wars? Not anymore. They're independent. The British. Who's that going to piss off? The people in Great Britain. And you cannot win a war without public support. The people in Great Britain are tired of wars. Wars mean death. Wars mean sacrifices. Wars mean taxes. The people in England are like, another war? For what this time? Oh, to keep those little redneck colonists still in our empire? Who cares? Let them be. They don't want to be in this country so bad. They left in the first place. Let them go. So the war is very unpopular at home, especially as it drags on. The first 2 years, everyone in Great Britain's like, yes, go, power to the king. By year 3, wait, we're still fighting those guys? We're still paying those taxes? We're still paying all that money to our army and navy and resources? And the British military is very spread thin around the world. When you fight everybody, you can't defeat anybody because you're worried about this, that, and the other. So advantages and disadvantages are important at the outset. Relax. You're not copying slides, you're taking big picture ideas. You're answering my questions. Slides exist, you're fine. Anyway, in the colonies, there's 3 groups. 3 groups. Patriots, Loyalists, and neutrals. These patriots are also known as Whigs, which is the party in Great Britain that's anti-king, anti-crown. And they're obvious, right? We know about them. They're the ones that want independence. The Loyalists are the group that wants to stay loyal to Great Britain for a variety of reasons. Either they're recent immigrants, so they're more connected to England, or they're really reliant on England economically. And they're worried if we break up, how are they going to make their money? Or idealistically, they don't believe in the revolution. Whatever. There's a variety of reasons why they stayed loyal. And the rest, this whole middle group, is just neutral. If you're in the middle of nowhere in the backcountry of Pennsylvania, you haven't paid the Stamp Act, you never heard about the Boston Massacre, you don't know what the hell is going on, you don't care. A third, this middle group is also worried about economic reasons. When it looks like Great Britain's going to win, there'll be more loyalists. When it looks like the Americans are going to win, they'll be more patriotic. We have a whole group that's kind of going back and forth based on who it looks like it's going to win. Because in a sense, this is the war for independence, but also a civil war. It is a war within the colonies against the colonies. So look at our map. Where do we see the most, blue areas are the most loyal to Great Britain areas? Take 20 seconds, talk to your partner. Where do we see loyalists and why? Go. Wilmington.
Like in the west side Wait, blue is loyalists, right?
All right.
That's New England, right?
Let's talk about this. Why are areas like Savannah, Charleston, Wilmington, Norfolk, which is basically right outside where Jamestown is, New York, why are these areas loyalist strongholds? Still loyal to England. Use some common sense here for me. There are seaports, yes, talk.
Like, why would a coastal town go against the strongest navy in the world?
Sure, why would the coastal towns go against the strongest navy? That's a compelling argument. I dig that. Talk to me.
Still dependent on Britain
Why?
for their shipping materials.
100%. These are the areas where they're selling all their cotton from. The cotton may be being grown back here, but all the trade of cotton is coming off of these seaports. Tobacco, not cotton yet, sorry. Tobacco, sugar, indigo, rice, trade, commerce, New York, trade. Recent immigrants go to New York and Philadelphia. So logical reasons, all these areas that have the most connection with Great Britain for economic and social and political reasons are the ones that are also then, therefore, the most happy to stay in the British Empire. Now the war itself, again, wars don't matter in terms of the military events. But from a strategic standpoint, Washington's job is to keep the army alive and fight as little as possible. It's a whole war about avoiding conflict. Because the more they get into conflict, the more the colonists are going to lose because the British army is bigger. And the whole point is to avoid conflict except on their terms. Again, very Vietnamese-esque. That if we can avoid conflict on the British terms, but instead meet them on our terms, they'll have the advantage. So Washington's whole purpose is to keep things alive, rely on guerrilla tactics, avoid all-out war, and whenever possible, kick the British in the shins until they go away. We have Washington's big Continental Army as the symbolic center of the war, but the local militias are going to play just as big of a role in keeping support alive. The argument is, as long as England doesn't defeat the actual Washington's army, England can't win. England invades the perceived capital of Philadelphia, and then people just leave. You okay, buddy? England controls New York, and the people that are important in New York just leave. England invades Boston, and the people that are important just leave. So England realizes that they can't win unless they capture Washington's army. That just never happens. Now, I don't ask you to know battles very often because they don't actually matter to our story as much as they're important to history. The one you should know from the Revolutionary War is the Battle of Saratoga. And in the Battle of Saratoga, Washington and his troops, they win. It's in upstate New York. It's a big battle, but it's only big because it convinces the French that, hey, maybe these guys do have a chance. And that is what gives the French to offer their full-fledged support, not just secret, hidden support. And that is a huge turning point of the war because with the French support, the war goes very, very differently. France is the first country to recognize or acknowledge that we exist as a country, as a new, independent, free nation. France now, instead of just sending us secret support, can actually send their navy and actually support the colonist cause. Ben Franklin is the guy in France asking for their help, negotiating for their help. Once the Battle of Saratoga happens, they say, fine, we'll sign an agreement to declare war in England with you and support. And now England has to worry about not just us, but the French Navy, a French invasion of England, and it makes England focus on more than just beating the colonists. Now my favorite part of the story comes next. 2 years into the war, England basically sends back to the colonies the exact same thing as the Olive Branch Petition. They send back to us the same offer we made to them in 1775, which said, hey, cut the taxes and we'll go back to minding our own business. What did the king say when we sent the Olive Branch Petition to them? Yeah, didn't even read it. I would not consider that. And now here they are 3 years later, sending back the exact same thing to us. They send to us a promise to remove all parliamentary legislation. No new regulations, no new laws, no new taxes. We will leave you alone forever. Same thing that we asked for in 1775. The Second Continental Congress says, go to hell. If this deal was good to you now, why wasn't it good to you 3 years ago before we got in all this trouble? Now it's too late. So again, another miscalculation by the British Crown in underestimating how actually persistent the colonists would be in their belief for independence. So here's some cool war maps. If you're into that kind of thing, I'm not going to talk about it, except to mention the Battle of Yorktown, which is where the war ends, because the British flee down to Yorktown, which is right here off the Chesapeake River. Their belief is they're going to escape by boat with their navy. It's not their navy that is waiting for them there, it is the French navy. So that's where the French come in. Washington pins them against the ocean, and they give up, and the war is over. The truly ironic thing, to me, is Yorktown is only a very, very short distance from Jamestown. So the British story in the North American colonies ends really in the same place where it begins. Jamestown being first in 1607. Here we are in 1781. So 174 years later, it ends just where it began. On the Chesapeake, right on the eastern seaboard, very close to Jamestown. War is over. The war is over. But let's talk about 3 subgroups during the war. The first is African Americans. If you are an African American in America in the 1770s, which side do you fight for?
The colonists.
Why? 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 If you're an African American in 1776, who do you fight with? Go ahead.
Britain.
Why?
Because Britain's allowing you to have more freedom.
Maybe. But Britain has slavery too. Who do you fight with? Eliam, who do you fight with?
Me?
Yeah, if you're an African American in the colony, slave or free, who do you fight with? Why?
I'm assuming that once they start seeing a conflict with the colonies and Britain, they probably saw it as an advantage so they try to escape slavery.
Okay, potentially. Now the answer is going to be both. African Americans will fight with whichever side promises them a better shot at freedom. In their own self-interest. It makes a ton of sense. Lord Dunmore's proclamation is super important. He's one of the British guys in charge of the war effort. And he puts this proclamation out before the war even starts. It says, any slave that leaves their master and fights for the British army will be freed after the war. So then we see a bunch of slaves leaving their master, fighting in the British army, and after the war, becoming free. We see slaves numbering in the thousands being sent to British Canada, where a significant number of freed slaves start their life in Canada, post-Revolutionary War. We see other freed slaves, because of Lord Dunmore's proclamation, being sent back to Africa and elsewhere in the Caribbean. But this is a significant number of freed slaves because of the war. Yes, ma'am, your question?
Never mind.
I answered it?
Yeah.
Good for me. For some, especially in the northern states, slaves are offered the chance for freedom for fighting for the colonist cause. And they do. Let's look at our map. Thomas Jefferson, July 4th, 1776, all men are created equal. Except slaves. But let's look at the northern states. Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, all New England, all end slavery immediately, either during or right after the Revolutionary War. Putting their money where their mouth is. Backing these... I'm trying to teach. Can you try to learn? backing these revolutionary ideals by banning slavery. What a concept. New York and Pennsylvania, shortly after, both create gradual emancipation laws. If you're born into slavery, you'll be freed on your 15th birthday. As opposed to immediate emancipation here, gradual emancipation. So all of these states, in the shadow of the Revolutionary War, banned slavery. It's in these states where we see some owners freeing their slaves on the condition that the slave goes support the Revolutionary War cause. And yet, all these other states don't. Why not? They rely too much on it. Sure. Sure. So what we see is now in these southern states, instead of just ignoring slavery, slavery becomes being defended as, yeah, it's evil, yeah, it doesn't match with our ideals, but we need it. It's necessary. And then later, it's good for the slave. It improves their lives. So it's important that we start looking at this evolution of sectionalism, North versus South, that's going to really start showing its teeth in this issue of slavery during and after the Revolutionary War. Northern states begin abolishing slavery. Southern states double down on slavery. We'll talk about that more as we go forward to the Constitution next week. But it doesn't matter where you are, free or slave, black, North or South, civil rights and rights as citizens are incredibly limited. Incredibly limited. So the experience for slaves during the Revolutionary War is varied. Depends on who you are, where you are, and what's going on. For women, they play a huge role in the Revolutionary War, which is awesome. Women's biggest role comes in their role with textiles and cloth by consistently making cloth at home. This is what we used to get from Great Britain. Women play a huge role in allowing our economy to become self-sufficient from Great Britain. Women participate anti-Stamp Act, anti-Townshend Act, so the Daughters of Liberty. Women are the ones running the households, running the estates, running the property while men are off fighting. And women are the ones oftentimes writing in the press, raising money at home to pay for the war, to keep public support up in colonial newspapers. So women play a huge role in this idea of public support by allowing the war to be successful by doing their part at home economically. Yes, ma'am. You have a question, tip of your tongue.
It's not a question, it's more of like, I can't remember exactly, like I remember back in Montez we learned about this one guy who wrote like the reason that women like don't have their own laws or whatever is because women are like the backbone of America.
We'll get to that, like Republican motherhood. And,
I don't remember what it's called, but like.
We'll talk. That's coming. Abigail Adams is a noteworthy revolutionary lady. She's married to John Adams. She's a badass. We'll learn more about her as we go.
Yep.
I like her way better than her husband. I'm not a huge fan of John Adams, but Abigail, she's pretty legit. And as these dudes are debating these huge ideas of independence and freedom, she's writing correspondence to him. Hey, I know your work is important, but while you're doing that, remember the very famous phrase, remember the ladies. Please, as you create this new society based on ideals, acknowledge the fact that we exist as well, and you should be creating a society that gives us the same freedoms and opportunities that you're trying to fight so hard for yourselves. Yeah, Abigail Adams is badass. What's so funny, Jose? Brett makes jokes about women? It's as close as he gets. So, last class, it was Alex Salazar that made those jokes. If you want to be categorized with him, then there we go. Mission accomplished. So women's role is important, though, in keeping those two things that matter: the funding, the financing, and the public support. Now, the war is going to end with the Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Paris. The second one you should know. What's the first one?
Treaty of Versailles.
This is the second Treaty of Paris we talked about in the last week and a half. What's the first Treaty of Paris? French and Indian War. What's the year? 1763. Good. Yeah. 1763. So how bad is that in 20 years we went from signing a treaty with the British to signing a treaty against the British in the same place? It's negotiated by John Adams, Ben Franklin, and John Jay. In it, the U.S. is given all that land that Britain just got from the French. But they wouldn't let us settle in. Oh well. Of course, the natives are left out of the whole process, not consulted, not asked. So the American colonists, now the United States of America, gets land from Great Britain that was never Great Britain's to give away anyway. But now what? It's easy to be a revolutionary, but now you have to create a whole new country from scratch. You have to create a whole new system, a whole new political system, a whole new economic system, a whole new social system, basically on a foundation that's never been done before. Nobody's done this. Nobody in world history has, at this scale, at this size, cast off their imperial power to create a democratic republic. So then now what is a legitimate question? It's a hard question. Because it's easy to put these things on paper. Jefferson did it right there, we read it. It's way harder to put what you put on paper into action. So America has these beautiful ideas about civil rights and private property and liberalism and republicanism and the common good and consent of the governed and representative government. And as was pointed out earlier in Virginia's Declaration of Rights, valuing what you do over who you are or what you're born into, that we should have self-made men, not men that are born rich making the decisions. And all these great ideas, they're there, we read them. The Virginia Declaration of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. We're going to live up to these beautiful ideals. But in reality, the exact same small, upper-class group of dudes is going to make the exact same types of decisions as we would make if we were still under Great Britain's control. Because despite all these beautiful ideas, the reality is the power and the money and the wealth and the education is still just listed right there at the top of society. Now that top might be a little bigger than Great Britain's top of society, but as we go forward and we look at the Articles of Confederation, the first formal system of government, and then the Constitution, and for all these early presidents, it is still just this limited group of super rich Americans that are making all the decisions and have all the power. Good job, America. Good job. So this is our Treaty of Paris, 1763, that gave Great Britain all of this land. 20 years later, they're going to give it to the colonists. So now all we have in North America that we have to worry about, colonies are here, the Spanish are here. Now in a couple years, France is going to get this back from the Spanish, and then we're going to buy it from France. But we'll get there when we get there. We'll get there when we get there. Mississippi, yes, that's a state that is in this territory. Are we just listing states? Arkansas, your turn. So, Louisiana, good, your turn. Go. It's a fun game.
No, but I was just saying.
You're just saying Mississippi? Excellent.
Texas.
So, to highlight for Thursday we'll look at these state constitutions that get made and the fact that after the war, we're much more independent states than we are a united country. After the war, we're like, cool, we came together, we fought our war. All right, peace out, we'll see you in the next war. We'll go back to our state and do things our way. Very little national governments. And we'll look at our first system of government, which is called the Articles of Confederation, which again, just allows each state to run things their own way and mind their own business. And we'll see some of the problems that come with that. So I want you to turn your page over, please, and take a shot at writing that complex prompt. Evaluate the differing, not the whole thing, just the statement. Get your practice in. Evaluate the differing significance of the relative causes for American independence. And in your thesis, make a claim. What's the biggest cause, while acknowledging some smaller causes exist as well? If I were you, I'd root your argument in what Jefferson said as what is the actual cause. Because he's telling us why they're revolting. Cool. Good question. What is this? Some are punished. We'll talk about that some more in the Confederation. Some are punished.
Where's the problem?
All loyalists have their property returned and their debts repaid.
This is why you're not my president.
All loyalists.
Stay
Write your response.